Good morning, everybody. It's Steve Brown from Mirae Asset Securities, Mirae Asset Live, Head of Institutional Sales, Vietnam. Joining us this morning, we have a very esteemed guest who's one of the longest serving, most experienced foreign experts in Vietnam, Peter RYDER, who founded INDOCHINA Capital, has gone on to do joint ventures now with Japanese conglomerates, and also is in the hospitality and real estate sector, as well as looking at investments in the capital markets. Peter, thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, Stephen. Thank you for having me.
Very good. Peter, can you just explain to us in your own unique way, because you've probably got the most unique experience of any foreigner, regardless of nationality, why you chose Vietnam and how it came to be?
Good question. Yeah, and something I often think about and wonder, what am I doing here for so long? No. Anyway, I came to Vietnam for the first time in 1992, actually January 1992. So before I came to Vietnam, I was living and working in Japan, in Tokyo. So I had 4 years of kind of Asia, or at least Asia Pacific, Far East Asia under my belt. Really loved my time in Japan, traveled all over Southeast Asia, China, etc. Ironically, every place but Vietnam. So then I actually got dragged back to New York. I was working for one of the big investment banks, Salomon Brothers, at the time. I got dragged back to New York in 1991, kind of kicking and screaming by the company. I'd signed up for 3 years. I was well into my 4th year, and they just said, "Hey, time to come back and pay your dues back in New York," which very reluctantly I did. Anyway, I was almost immediately looking for an opportunity to get back to Asia, Asia Pacific specifically, and along came an opportunity to explore a transaction, a real estate transaction. I was in real estate finance at Salomon, so real estate was in my blood. I mean, interestingly, I was in the process of leaving Salomon. I was going to go off and join with one of my partners at Salomon. We were creating our own firm to do real estate finance, development, et cetera, investment. And just as I was literally the week that like 1 or 2 days before leaving, my fax machine, this was back in the days, 1991, when fax machines still were the principal mode of communication, right? And boom, my fax machine started to rattle in my office, and out spit an old tourist map of Ho Chi Minh City, right? And on the tourist map was a circle, and then an arrow, and then written at the other end of the arrow was, "Would you be interested in this site in Saigon?" I was like, whoa, So anyway, that was what actually kickstarted my journey. So 2 weeks later, I literally hopped on an airplane. Please
May I ask?
Yeah.
Where was the site?
The site was in Chalon, right, Chinatown,
Yep.
right on the border of District 5 and District 6, so very much across the street from the Binh Thanh market, which I was at the time, I believe still is the largest traditional market in Vietnam, and kitty corner to the Chalon bus station, which was the largest bus station. So it was a pretty prime site, right?
Carry on.
But anyway, so I come, and I immediately, literally fell in love with the place. 2 days in Saigon, then a day up in Hanoi. And one of the reasons I was so receptive was the fact that I had grown up, literally I was in adolescence when the war was raging, right? And I became very anti-war, very precociously anti-war, 15, 16 years old. Among other things, I led my high school on strike against the war in the spring of 1970. I had this attraction to Vietnam, and because of my experience during the war, I was just too young to serve or have to make the choice of whether I would serve or not. But I read as much as I could get my hands on about Vietnam. Never actually studied formally, but read a lot. So I had a pretty good background in Vietnamese history, culture, et cetera, before arriving. Last but not least, I started off life as an anthropologist. And I'd always been quite intrigued by exotic, traditional cultures. So, you know, that's kind of the soup mix, if you will.
Well, that soup mix has probably molded you very beneficially into your managerial approach in Vietnam and preceding that in Japan. Because even now in Vietnam, some of your largest business partners in certain areas of what you do, and you do a lot of things, Japanese still to this day. So can you expand upon the anthropological and cultural infusion with your Salomon Brothers smarts as well and expertise in your Vietnamese approach to business?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, no, a lot of people when they learn that I started off life, as you will, as actually an anthropological archaeologist studying the Maya in Central America. But say like, how did you wind up as a real estate developer in Vietnam, right? But look, I think the kind of the cultural sensitivity that a background in anthropology sort of induces or produces is really critical to having a chance, you know, well, let's not even say being successful, having a chance at being successful in Vietnam, because the way of doing business here at the end of the day is so relationship oriented. If you don't have some sensitivity and understanding and willingness to really learn about what makes your Vietnamese counterparts, your Vietnamese employees tick, you don't have a chance. So I feel that, you know, my anthropological training and, you know, and then the rigors of investment banking, you know, working strictures and whatnot has turned out to be quite a beneficial, helpful background.
So over that period of time, you've seen over 30 years quite a few changes in Vietnam. Do Moi, the opening, Bill Clinton coming, acknowledging open relations with Vietnam, and then after the normalization of relations, an influx of foreign direct investment, and then also post that soon after with the establishment of the stock exchanges, FII, and also a large mix of private equity and more recently venture capital. With firstly Indochina Capital, it's kind of one of the sleeping giants success stories of Vietnam. This year to date, it's done very well. In the last couple of years, it's done incredibly well. Over 20% CAGR annualized. Expand upon that and your managerial approach, maybe a couple of your team members and the sectors that you focus on, and then we'll dive into some of your other investments.
Sure. Well, just to kind of go back to the very start of the question, asking me if basically implying I've seen a lot of change. Now, of course, on the surface, there's been an enormous amount of change here in Vietnam. I mean, you know, what Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City looks like today compared to when I woke up on January 15th, 1992. I mean, it's like night and day. Da Nang, there was nothing in Da Nang over 3 stories at the time, right? So on the surface, in a material context, in an infrastructural context, whatever, there's been enormous change. I would argue, though, that at the fundamental cultural level, there's been almost no change. And I think that's to me, again, that's one of the reasons why I've, from the very beginning, thought Vietnam was going to have enormous opportunity and ultimately turn into one of the, you know, greater economic stories of our time. And I say that because I'm really referring to the strength of the culture, the strength of the cultural values here, whether it be family-oriented, religious-oriented, you know, the incredible ethnicity, homogeneity that you have in Vietnam are all really big pluses. And, you know, to quote whoever it was, Nietzsche or Aristotle or maybe Sinatra, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So just as a, you know, to kind of start there. But, you know, from a managerial style, I really believe in, you know, promoting and empowering, you know, the key people, all the people, but really the key people that work for me. Indochina as an entity has been around 21, 22 years now, almost 23. My key staff, all of them have been with me for at least 15 years. Some as many as 18, 19, even 20 years. So I've built a very solid foundation. I've got people like Michael Puro, my chief operating officer, who's also the CEO of Wink Hotels. Michael is just an incredibly hardworking, talented guy, and we've just been on the same, you know, plane day one. Hua Chung, my CFO, has been with me now for 15 years. She runs our Saigon office. In addition to her kind of CFO responsibilities, she really spearheads our government relations efforts and whatnot. Incredibly dedicated. Just like Michael, somebody I love being around, right? Tuan Bui, who runs Indochina Kajima for us, also 15, 16, 17 years. Amazingly hardworking, just great guy. And, you know, I go out of my way to empower these people. I mean, I say, hey, please, you know, make sure I know what's going on, okay? Involve me when it's necessary, but otherwise, run with it, go for it. And that kind of, you know, that goes from senior management to middle management all the way down to, you know, the kids who have just joined us in the last 6 months.
Now, moving on to Kajima, you've got a business venture there, which is also expanding alliances with large foreign direct investors, such as the Deep Sea Port and Logistics Supercenter, where you're developing ready-built warehousing spaces.
And factories.
And factories, of course, also down south. Enlighten us on those.
Sure. So the relationship with Kajima, which is you know, really far and away our most important corporate relationship. Indochina Kajima, our development arm, it's a 50-50 venture with Kajima. That relationship goes all the way back to the years I was in Tokyo, when I had the opportunity to meet you know, Kajima senior management, most importantly the then chairman, legendary chairman, Dr. Kajima, who was actually the last Kajima family member to run the organization. But anyway, that ultimately led to, you know, 25 years later, our joint venture relationship. So we're very focused on, well, we've really got 3 platforms, if you will. One of them being the industrial IP, where we're doing both ready-built factory warehouse as well as large-scale logistics centers. Then we've got Wink Hotels. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure, in a bit. And then last but not least, the incredible resort project in Fujian province at Bainome, where just last week we signed the management agreement with Mandarin Oriental. So now known as Mandarin Oriental Bainome Resort.
You alluded to that when we met last, but you didn't. It wasn't publicized at the time. So congratulations.
Thanks, Steve.
Next 5 to 10 year vision then for Kajima. You'll have a lot going on a few different fronts there. So just explain to us where you see this all heading.
Right. Well, you know, upward and upward and upward. I mean, we have, depending on how you count, 21 or 22 projects in one stage of development or not. And we're taking very much a at a minimum, medium term, mostly long-term view. So for sure, right now, the market, the real estate market in Vietnam in particular, right, is under a lot of duress, stress, et cetera, for the various scandals that have hit it, the banking situation, et cetera, et cetera. But again, we take a very long-term, outlook on it. Reflected on, the past development work we've done, with developments such as what is now the Four Seasons Nam Hai Resort, Six Senses Condao, Indochina Plaza Hanoi, et cetera. All, who went through their ups and downs initially, but now extremely successful projects. So I think, I'm very confident that looking 5 to 10 years into the future, are the 3 platforms that I described earlier will have turned out to be quite successful.
Now, before we dive into Wink, when will the Mandarin Oriental open?
The earliest would be 2025, but most likely 2026. So where we're at with the project, we've formally signed with Mandarin, so we can go public on it. Just as importantly, we've now started construction. Early site work, site office, the beginnings of the necessary infrastructure and whatnot. Will be over the next 9-12 months building mock-up units. There are 4 different types of accommodation there, 72 units in total. We've got hill residences, beach residences that we'll be selling as branded Mandarin Oriental branded residences. And then we've got hotel villas, and then hotel suites, which are these massive, beautiful hotel rooms, but really extraordinary. Incredible design, working with some of the world's very best designers. Again, if all goes well, we'd be in a position to open, say, mid-2025, knowing the way things go here with the various approvals that are still required, the very detailed design work, et cetera. I'd be more confident in, say, January or first quarter 2026, but somewhere in that period.
Okay, and keeping you busy right now through to then and thereafter is also Wink Hotels. You've got a vision for dozens of those, top to tail of Vietnam. You've already got some open, running successfully, even here in Ho Chi Minh City.
Yeah.
The brand on that is also more affordable than the Mandarin Oriental chain. So for
just a little bit,
the new mass affluent Vietnamese domestic market can use them ideally. Plus also the budget conscious foreign inbound travelers as well. So
sure.
I think that's a multi-phase setup. You've got strategy. Can you explain the Wink strategy?
Sure. Firstly, what is Wink? Okay. So Wink is above and beyond everything else, brand new. New concept for Vietnam. I would argue new concept, certainly regionally, if not globally. But Wink is, first and foremost, an affordable luxury hospitality offering. So as opposed to budget, because you go into a Wink hotel and they're beautiful, right? And they're really well put together. The service is extraordinary, but you can go stay at the Wink, what we call Wink Saigon Center, at 75 Nguyen Binh Kiem here in District 1. And it's going to cost you $60, $70 max at this point in time. We hope that number goes up over the next year or so. So affordable luxury, hospitality brand. And then Wink is, really designed for the new type of traveler, okay? Who is the new type of traveler? Well, they're the entrepreneurs, right? They're the explorers. They're the adventure capitalists, right? They're the creators, and of course, the lovers, right? You sit in a Wink lobby in the morning, when people are coming in and out, having breakfast or whatnot, and you're going to see young people, you're going to see old people, you're going to see Asians, you're going to see Westerners, you're going to see boys, you're going to see girls, you're going to see business travelers, you're going to see tourists. I mean, it's an extraordinary mix. And last but not least, Wink is a beautifully designed and very colorful, very artistic and very colorful neighborhood hub.
So the local communities find it kind of a social gathering place, local cool hangout as well.
Exactly.
So Core 5?
So Core 5, that is our industrial platform, right? And we have borrowed the name from Kajima's very successful US subsidiary, which is called Core 5. And for those who, and not that anybody would be overly familiar with Kajima, but one of Japan's largest construction companies in the big four, and also very much under the radar, one of the largest Japanese overseas real estate developers. And they've been at this game for an incredibly long time. They opened their first subsidiary in the United States, I think, more than 50 years ago, probably even more than 60 years ago. And their focus in the US has long been industrial. They have an amazing track record. And several years ago, they decided to brand what they're doing in the industrial field in the US as Core 5. Again, very generously, they've enabled us to adopt the Core 5 brand name for Vietnam. So we're operating under Core 5 Vietnam. And, we everybody in the world sees an enormous opportunity to tap into the growing, expanding manufacturing section of Vietnam's economy. Obviously, we're not a manufacturer, but we're a real estate developer. So we're looking at, again, ready-built factory, ready-built warehouse, and logistics centers. Our focus is principally in the north because, frankly, land prices in the north are less than in the south, but the rental rates you achieve are almost identical, right? So it doesn't take a lot to figure out that the better return might be. Anyway, but we've also got actually one extraordinary project in the greater Saigon region that we're going to be announcing shortly, and continue to look for opportunities really throughout the country.
Very good. Now moving on to some recent machinations in the real estate scene this year. We saw Decree 65 implemented by the government as a way to help clean up the issues that were affecting real estate developers through their issuances of corporate bonds. Mm-hmm. So we'll get some more clarity and transparency from the developers' point of view, the issuers, and also the investors in those will have some more comfort in the asset that they've got. Sure. At the time. Now, we won't dive in too much into the recent bubble that we had Q4 last year, where the 2 TM land auctions went on and kind of artificially spiked the market for various reasons. But in a way, that was kind of, it enabled a cathartic reset of the players, the local players who were used to issuing corporate bonds to help fund their development projects. A lot of the foreign investors like yourself come in fully funded or, without local corporate bond issuance connectivity. The outlook for the real estate sector in Vietnam, from your point of view, the next, say, 5 years, maybe out to 10, if you can explain on that too. And you mentioned the advantages, say, of the North, Hanoi, and if you could also just add a little bit of North-South input.
That's a lot.
So 5-10 years, North-South.
In 60 seconds or less. No,
your kidding. Time starts now.
Anyway, look, we're very old school, as it relates to our business model, if you will. I mean, INDOCHINA Kajima injects equity into every one of its deals. We have funding from Kajima Parent. We have funding from other third parties, all foreign investors at this point in time, although we're very receptive to local capital as well. But so we just use a blend of equity and then bank financing. So we've completely avoided the bond segment of real estate financing, if you will. So we were able to secure financing for the Nam Hai development in 2005 from Vietcom Bank on a non-recourse, on a mortgage non-recourse basis, no guarantees. First time that was ever achieved by a foreign developer. And we've continued to build on that. We've worked extensively with a handful of banks in Vietnam, Vietcom Bank, Vietin Bank, and others. The last time I looked, I mean, we probably borrowed, in excess of $500 million from local banks. We've also, through Kajima, begun to work with Japanese banks as well. But again, it's very old school in the way we approach, and it's very, typically we won't go any higher than, say, 60, 65% kind of loan to cost. So quite conservative financing that we've done. And I think that puts us in a very good position to weather, kind of the very typical ups and downs of real estate in general, and then, of course, here throw in a little Vietnamese salt and pepper, if you will. But much as I said before, I remain, I've been bullish on Vietnam since day one. I've continued to be very bullish, and I believe the future here, whether it be real estate, whether it be manufacturing, whether it be the more creative aspects of business and life, I again remain highly confident.
And the airport expansions, we've had this year to date about 9 million foreign visitors, but the new mass affluent Vietnamese coming through, GDP per capita increasing, courtesy into a lot of instances to foreign direct investors coming in, providing employment opportunities throughout the massive industrial parks and factories here. So the domestic travel to places like Da Nang, where you've got your hospitality developments going on, almost 9 million in the month of November 2022. So you're probably seeing a lot of replacement from where you may have traditionally seen in Da Nang, say, inbound Koreans wanting to play some golf and enjoy the beach and surf, with Vietnamese wanting that now. So sure. The price points for Wink in that destination are probably very attractive for the local tourism market as well, for your occupancy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, kind of just to bounce around a little bit, I mean, Wink is fundamentally, first and foremost, a Vietnamese brand. And our target market is domestic, okay? Business as well as tourist, vacation, staycation, et cetera, travelers, visitors. Foreign tourists, foreign business people, and again, go into the lobby of Wink here and you'll see a lot of them. I mean, they're kind of like icing on the cake, if you will. But our price points, I think as I mentioned earlier, right now it'll cost you somewhere between $60 and $70 a night to stay at Wink Saigon. And I assure you, to match the same level of accommodation and service, you're going to be paying twice, at least twice, to stay in another hotel. But domestic travel has come back with a vengeance, so to speak, post-COVID now. I think if you look at the overall numbers, they're actually in excess of what they were, say, in 2019 or pre-COVID. International travel still, I mean, it's coming back in a big way, up very significantly over last year, 75% or something of that ilk. Once Chinese visitors start coming back, I think you're going to see the numbers very quickly equaling and exceeding those of 2019 pre-COVID. However, You touched on it at the very beginning of the question, the airports, okay? Airports infrastructure. In my mind, the biggest challenge that Vietnam faces is in continuing, accelerating, if you will, the transportation infrastructure. You know, principally the airports, but also roads, ultimately train systems and whatnot. As it stands now, the major airports, Hanoi, Saigon, Da Nang, they're running close to capacity, if not over capacity. That, you know, I mean, new runways being built in Hanoi, maybe even 2 new runways are being built in Hanoi, and obviously the Bien Hoa airport here. Critical that the development of this infrastructure is accelerated, funded properly, you know, and built properly.
Excellent. Peter, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Quite unique, you know, and we hope to see the future developments of your hotels here go to, I think, 20 or 30 was the vision in the next 10 years for Wink, is that
yeah,
right?
I mean, so we you know, I've thrown out the figure 20, right?
Yes.
You know, kind of within Vietnam, but we're also now very likely going to open in Singapore.
Wow. Okay.
Looking very seriously at an opportunity in Phnom Penh. And as one of my Kajima partners said after the very, very successful opening of Wink Da Nang Center last week, how about Hawaii? You know, Wink Waikiki has a nice ring to it. So,
Sounds nice.
Yeah. but Stephen, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And I really appreciate the opportunity that you know, that Mirae Asset Management has provided me today.
Very good. Peter RYDER, thank you so much. Steve Brown from Mirae Asset Securities, and have a good morning.